ladyship, thank you so much for sitting and having this chat with me. It's a privilege and an honor.
Thank you and welcome to my home.
After reading Joy, in the spirit of the season, I can't help but ask if you continued with the 31st December ritual that Elizabeth exposed you to.
The scrubbing.
Yes.
Scrubbing and dusting and washing and making sure that nothing dirty from the previous year went into the new year. Just made sure that you couldn't sit up and wait and do watch night. But of course, growing up, we then started attending watch night services. But 31st December has never been a pleasant day for me because of all the scrubbing and dusting and whatever.
Yeah. Is this something you expose your own children to?
Oh, yes. But as time has gone by, I'm sure they found their own style.
Right. Well, thank you for this. Because reading this is like knowing you, knowing the historical context within which you grew up, your life story, and there's even a connection with your personality. So thank you so much for this.
In broad strokes.
I've said that every young girl should read this. Every adult woman should read this. It makes a lot of difference.
My daughter thought so. That's why I allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
My daughter Nanekuya said, "You must." And I said, "I don't want to be." But she said, "It will inspire other people." And I'm a sucker for that one.
Right.
So once she made those arguments, I said, if it will help somebody, why not?
There are things that you know, people would hear and be very surprised. The fact that you sing, the fact that you are into poetry, and you actually recited a few on GBC radio.
Yes.
You got your first paycheck.
Yes.
From that.
Yes.
Tell us how you were exposed to that.
As you must know, my father was at GBC, and there was this children's program hosted by Mrs. Hannah Dankwa Smith. God rest her soul, she passed on earlier this year. And so he told her about me, and she wanted to meet me, and so she put me on the program. I went more than once. There's one of the pictures there is of me as a 10-year-old.
Right.
Did you see it on the wall?
I must have missed it, but we're capturing it, so our viewers and our listeners will get a feel of it.
So it was a picture from the radio and TV times.
Right.
That's an uncle of mine who must have a sense of history. He'll be pleased to hear me say that. Kept the pictures. So less than 10 years ago, he told me, "Do you know I have your picture from when you were in primary school and you went to GBC to recite?" I said, "You do?" And he said, "Yes, I made a cutting." And he sent it to me. And so I scanned, photocopied, whatever. So now I have lots of copies of that one. And one of those is framed on the wall.
Incredible. But I know the singing must have come from Elizabeth, your mom.
Yes. And my dad too, actually. Wherever he went as a teacher, they were classmates. I'm sure you got that from me.
Yes.
So wherever he went as a teacher, he was a choir master in the Methodist Church. If they had no choir, he started one. So there's singing in the family, yes.
And it's, even when you went to Yale, you joined the choir.
Yes. That was the only way I could stay sane.
But now you're no longer in the choir, but you're a patron.
When I'm in Ghana, I don't find the time, unfortunately.
Right.
But I used to sing in the singing band because there you didn't need to attend rehearsals. So I joined the singing band in my church for a number of years, but now they have enough members not to need part-timers like me, so I no longer sing with them.
Right. Well, another thing that's close to you and indeed the family is the NSMQ.
Yes.
It's this contest is for the nation, really, but you were once a director. It's interesting, though, that your school, Wesley High Wesley Girls has never won it. Is this something that you worry about?
It's a matter of practice and preparation, and I think the girls' schools have other challenges. You know, the kind of, when I hear the kind of preparation and practice the boys' schools put their contestants through, then I know it will be a challenge for the young women, because parents tend to want their daughters to come home during vacation.
Right.
Most of the contestants stay on in school, and parents don't like that with their daughters.
Right.
So I think it's a matter of practice and preparation and strategy. And the young ladies are every bit as intelligent and capable as but with everything you need practice, and they just don't have the time.
Right. Is this something that you wish you could change?
I don't know about wishing to change. You can wish on a star. I mean, parents do. I remember growing up, you know, the first thing my parents would do when they went out and came home was to ask, "Where's Rita?" So, I mean, I don't think they would have agreed that you should just stay on in school preparing for a contest 2 years ahead, as the boys do. You know, so I wish things were different, but the world will not stop being round because you'd rather have a square world, you know.
Right.
So you take what you have and you go with it.
Maybe someday it will happen.
Maybe someday it will happen, yes.
But you pronounced your name. You just mentioned Rita. Henrietta. I'm learning the right pronunciation. But it's fascinating, from reading the book, I discovered where that name came from. Because your parents got it from a play. How did you get to learn about it, and have you watched the play?
Well, my parents were classmates at Wesley College, and they staged this play, The Barretts of Wimpole Street. Incidentally, in Form 1 or Form 2, it was our literature book.
Okay.
Yes, and so mine isn't the only name from Barretts of Wimpole Street. My eldest brother, Octavius, or Oki. Oki comes from, and Richard, Dr. Bamfo. Richard also comes from the Barretts of Wimpole Street. There were many of them, but the most famous, incidentally, is Elizabeth Barrett, who eloped with the poet Robert Browning.
Right.
So she's Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and she's a famous English poet.
What is it with the play that all the children have something to do with it by way of where their names come from?
They were classmates. They did a play together in school. They loved it. They decided that they'd like to see. Those days, in our era, giving English names was the thing. So I suppose in my father's family, every biblical name you can think of is there. So maybe he wanted to move away from having to call me Mary or Anna or something. And
right.
Yeah, so, but it comes from their school days and the play they acted in together. So,
one of the things the book also highlighted, you got a C in P. That would soon change, by the way, because of your parents. But just wondering, C in P, 10 things around, soon became a champion in athletics in your school. And then you got a first class in LLB at Legon. I mean, you had, even with all these achievements, you are still doing the housework. How did you manage that kind of balance, even as a young person?
My mother was particular about keeping your surroundings clean and running a home. And, you know, so I grew up in a home. And so some of the things were part of what you learned growing up in a home. Now, this C that I got in PE, what it did was to tilt. You see, when your report came in, my father would take it and the couple would discuss. Between the two of them, you could never set one against the other. They were always on the same page on everything. So they must have discussed what to tell me. And so my father took the report, counted how many A's and B's I had versus how many C's. And my mother said, "You are not an average student, but this report is telling us you are an average student, and we cannot accept that." And my father said, "You even made a C in PE." And I said, "You see, but for that C, the balance would not have tilted." And they were not impressed. And so they went through the report with me. And my father discovered that I had joined a lot of societies, because in Wesley Girls Forms 1 to 3, you couldn't join any society. But in Form 4, you could join any society. And I had joined so many that, according to him, I attended a society meeting every day, and even Sundays and extras. And I said, "No, that's not how it works." He says, "Well, that's the story the report tells us. And so you have to choose. You can choose any two, but you shouldn't have to commit to more than 2 societies and society meetings every week. It means you are not spending enough time studying." And that's what I did. So that is the story of the PE. I was always as much of a sportswoman as I could manage. I represented Wesley Girls at Interco throwing shot, the shot put.
Yeah, you're an expert in that.
Shot put was my event, and now I have a sore shoulder for it.
Oh.
And then I played hockey.
You were captain of the hockey team?
Which my father also played in school.
Right.
The initial Ghana hockey team, he was on it with Mr. Kenamwa.
Right.
The late Mr. Kenamwa of GBC,
right.
yes. So my father was very sporty in that way. My mother, no.
You know, I'm asking this because a lot of the young ones, well, we're all guilty of it. We're on social media a lot. But you did a bit of everything and still you were excellent. How do you balance it today with social media?
In our day, there was no social media. So maybe we are talking of different eras, and,
right.
But I was interested in those things. And when I wasn't interested, I didn't put in much effort. So I suppose my interest had something to do with it. And my mother was always insistent that she was bringing up an African woman, and I had to be an African woman. So
right.
Housework, cleaning, scrubbing, my goodness, and all of that was part of my upbringing. So I can't claim any credit, really, for getting things just right. I was just lucky.
Wow.
I keep saying that for me, I don't call it luck. I call it the grace of God. And I've enjoyed plenty of it. God has been there for me at every point when something could have gone wrong. So I feel a bit of a fake claiming credit for something over which I had no control. Somebody was out there looking out for me, that's all.
Right. Let's talk about your first national assignments outside this country, even though you came back to also be on the National Reconciliation Commission as a member.
Let me tell you that my first national assignment was not what you think, but as a member of the legal committee of the National Commission of
Right.
I represented Ghana on the Intergovernmental Committee of Experts on the Declaration of Welfare, the Rights and Welfare of the African Child.
Right.
So that was when I stood out as a Ghanaian to represent the interests of Ghana and the Ghanaian child. And that committee, that legal committee did a lot. We initiated the conversations on child abuse and child labor and all of those things in the early 90s, and interacted with the new district assemblies to draw their attention to the plight of children in their district assemblies. And I'm sure it's no surprise to you that Ghana was the first to ratify the rights of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. We had a lot to do with that.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So that was the first assignment, really, on behalf of the children of Ghana. Yes.
Right. Well, thanks to you, we've come a long way. But the assignment that I thought was the first national assignment, I guess, was widely reported also. Maybe that's why we skipped the very first national assignment. But you also went on to be on the National Reconciliation Committee. In fact, you were the youngest member then to be on the commission.
They nicknamed me Baby Commissioner.
How did you do it, really? You're a professor at the age of 45. You were on all these important commissions and committees. How do you think that happened for you?
What happened was when I was tapped for it, I was a little nervous. Incidentally, the president now was the Attorney General who called me to a sudden meeting, and I had just come home from representing Ghana on the Lockerbie, the OAU committee on Lockerbie. So I thought that was what the Attorney General wanted to report to Cabinet about, because he said he needed to see me. He was going to Cabinet. So I thought he was going to report on Ghana's position on Lockerbie. So I took all the extra reports, thinking that maybe what I submitted through the ministry hadn't reached him. And I got there and he said, the president says to tell you that you should serve on this committee. I said, no, I'm too young. And he said, well, President Kufuor thinks the young people of Ghana also need to be represented. Because I thought it was for very senior people. So that's how I got on. And that told me that the nature of it was going to be difficult to combine with anything. So I took a sabbatical. I was due for a sabbatical anyway, but had not planned to take it. But when that happened, then I applied formally to take a sabbatical. So I was on sabbatical leave for the period. Right. But I had to teach because we were short-staffed. So I did extra teaching just to keep things going at the faculty. But I was on sabbatical leave officially. Right.
One of the important committees, I guess, would be the education review, of which you're a member of. And I can't help but ask, because of the work that you did, the quality of education today, particularly in the tertiary education level, is that what the plan was? Is that what you envisaged?
This is the Anamoa Committee, Anamoa Mensa Committee. And you see, some things steal up on you if you don't take care. So suddenly there was an explosion and everybody wanted tertiary education, which is good because in the past, the international organizations we dealt with thought that people should have primary education. And I remember personalities like Dr. Okonjo-Iweala saying that she had got to where she had got to not because of primary education, but because of tertiary education. So the need to switch around our focus so that people could have tertiary education became preeminent. The problem with the educational system is that it's a social good. So some things can steal up on you. We used to have what they called, I forget what the name is now, it was the Ministry of Finance, but it was like they tried to match our human resource needs. Those days they called it manpower something. But I think at some point we abandoned it. Unfortunately, I think although we had adopted, I was a member of committees on campus, we had adopted 40–60% in favor of science because we were producing too many arts graduates. But when there was the explosion in the tertiary sector, I think too many of the private institutions went in the direction of the general arts system, which is not as expensive as science. And so I believe that's been part of the difficulties we've had, that we have so many people with qualifications in the arts, and there's a dearth of science-based disciplines.
Right.
But I think we'll get it right as we go on. So you wanted to know what I think of it. I think every generation produces what it is capable of producing. Our students are still doing very well when they go abroad to other universities in the same way as in my generation. So who am I to say that their quality is lower?
Right.
It may be different, but it may be dictated by the needs of the time. Now they have all these social media outlets to help. They have all these computers. In our day, we literally slept in the law library. In their day, they have most of the materials they need on their laptops. The difference is that we went to the library to read because there was no other option. They think they have the material on their laptops, so they know it. And I have been constantly cajoling them that having it in your room is not equivalent to having it in your head. So I think making the jump between having it ready on hand and reading it has been a challenge for some.
Right. Are you surprised that we have all these numbers wanting to read law?
No, not surprised. You see, all these bright young people, mostly young men, appearing on TV and throwing around theories, it's bound to make law look fascinating. It has always been, I must say, but now it's even more fascinating. In our parents' generation, and I suppose in mine, many people read law while working so that when they retired from the public service, they could have careers in law. But I think the young people now, their aims may be different. But I suspect that seeing all these jazzy looking young people throwing around big words and big ideas and so on has to have some attraction for young people. So maybe that's the reason.
How was it in your, well, maybe your time and years after? Because recently, when over 800 students were called to the bar, young lawyers were called to the bar, it made a huge buzz. People were posting lawyers and people were looking for lawyers who had graduated to post. How were you celebrating it in your days?
In our day,
Called to the bar.
life was very different. I think in my class, we may have been maybe a little over 60 called to the bar. We had had a disturbed year, going to carry cocoa and all of that. I'm not complaining because I was able to have my second child in peace. So we were called to the bar in December. And And in those days, the call was held in the Chief Justice's court, which is a much smaller court than the Supreme Court. I think it was remodeled and expanded and so on. But in those days, the call was in the court, in the courtroom, and it was a small event. You took it, you celebrated. I remember cooking for a few people. I loved to cook. These days, I don't cook anymore. But cooking was my hobby, really. And I took cookery for O-level. So I remember having a little dinner party for my friends and family who had come. But those days, it wasn't a big deal. Those days, it wasn't a big deal.
Right.